just going to go right into it. Thanks again for everybody for watching. I'm Jeff White, and I'm here tonight to talk about Civil War music and to play Civil War music. And I'm here with the gracious support of the Rappahannock Valley Civil War Roundtable. I want to thank them for their support for this. The story is I was supposed to be doing a roundtable talk and performance tonight, but because of the coronavirus and social distancing and all that, they decided that we couldn't do it. And we put our heads together and said, well, how can we make this happen? And I said, well, why don't I do this Facebook Live concert? And it is being recorded, actually, so we can put it on all sorts of media afterwards. And that's why I'm here tonight. And so thank you again to the Rappahannock Valley Civil War Roundtable for making this possible. I'm here tonight. I have 4 purposes. The first is, if you don't know anything about Civil War music, then hopefully you'll learn something here, and that's number 1. For those who know a lot about Civil War music already, I hope maybe I can give you something you didn't already know. And for those who already know everything about music of the Civil War, actually at least everything that I know, I hope I can at least entertain you. And for those of you who are watching for whatever reason and will not be entertained, then I'm going to play for myself because I enjoy hearing myself play. So if nothing else, that's what I'm going to do tonight. So I just played Soldier's Joy. That's a tune you would have heard around the campfire, certainly. Anybody who had a fiddle or anybody who had a fife, a flute, anything like that, that was a tune you would have heard during the time of the Civil War. One kind of song was the kind of song that crossed the Mason-Dixon line. And some of these songs were very popular, both north and south. And they would change the words to match what the audience wanted. Probably the most famous of these is the Battle Cry of Freedom. And actually in McPherson's book, excellent book on the Civil War, Battle Cry of Freedom, he presents both lyrics for that piece of music. It depended if you were north of the Mason-Dixon line, it would be hurrah or huzzah for the Union. And if you were a Southerner, it would be our Dixie forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah. And I'm going to play it for you now. One of the most popular composers in the time of the Civil War in the mid-19th century was Stephen Foster. I like to call him the Bob Dylan of the mid-19th century because he was able to take music influences and bring them to audiences that normally would not have played or sung or heard this kind of music. And we still sing his songs today. His influence cannot be overstated. And I'm going to sing actually a song for you right now that he wrote. I'm going to put my fiddle down, take a sip of tea. Probably one of the most famous tunes, if not the most famous tune he wrote, was called Hard Times, Come Again No More. I think we could certainly think about that with what's going on these days. Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears, while we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered upon around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. There's a reason I got tripped up. You'll understand that in just a minute. While we seek mirth and beauty and music light and gay, there are frail forms fainting at the door. Though their voices are silent, their pleading looks will say, oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. I got tripped up there because my next point I want to make is that the soldiers on the front lines would often take popular songs. You might have heard me warming up there earlier. The Siege of Vicksburg was one that they wrote to a tune called The Mockingbird. And it was about their experiences at the Siege of Vicksburg when the parrot shells were whistling through the air. Another one would be Hardtack. They took the song I just sang, and the soldiers put their own unique spin on it, talking about one of the staples of the soldiers' diet. Hardtack would be this cracker about that big, an overgrown saltine, basically, maybe a finger's width, baked to the point that it had no moisture in it, so it could keep almost indefinitely, but it was hard as a rock, and the joke was that a soldier would say, as he was eating his hardtack, oh, I bit into something soft, and another soldier would say, oh, it must have been a nail. Let us pause our game of poker, take our tin cups in our hand, as we all stand by the cook's tent door. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hardtack, come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the hungry. Hardtack, come again no more. Many days you have lingered upon our stomachs sore. Oh, hardtack, come again no more. Of course, the thing you probably don't want to ask is how much worse can it get? And the soldiers definitely found out. The 1st Iowa Regiment, while they were on the campaign that culminated in the Battle of Wilson's Creek in Missouri in 1861, were camped at a place that they unaffectionately called Camp Mush. It was they named it after the unpalatable corn meal that they ground to try to give them something to eat because they couldn't even get hardtack. And so this was their final verse that they wrote about hardtack. But to all these cries and murmurs, there comes a sudden hush, as frail forms are fainting at the door. For they feed us now on horse feed that the cooks call mush. Oh, hardtack, come again once more. 'Tis the dying wail of the starving. Hardtack, hardtack, come again once more. You were old and very wormy, but we pass your failings o'er. Oh, hardtack, come again once more. So that, I hope, gives you an idea of the kind of humor, the gallows humor, that the soldiers would have engaged in. I'm going to switch back to the fiddle. And like I said, there are songs that we still sing today that were sung at the time of the Civil War. Not the least of these is a song that was actually sung by Elvis Presley. And he turned the song Aura Lee by George Poulton into his own unique version. I'm going to play my own unique version for you right now. A lot of people ask me, I'm referring to my notes here for those who aren't sure. A lot of people ask me what the difference between a violin and a fiddle is. And the technical scientific answer is you don't cry when you spill beer on your fiddle. I think that's funny, but it actually is pretty true. You can play a Mozart concerto on your grandpa's old cigar box. You can play a hoedown on a Stradivarius. There's not much really different. They have 4 strings. They have a sound box and are played with a bow. Stylistically, of course, the player can put his own inflection on it and make it a fiddle tune or a violin song. But there are certain things on a fiddle that make it a fiddle. For one thing, steel strings. I use steel strings and not gut or synthetic gut. The steel strings have better tuning stability. They are more responsive, but they are not as musically complex. So they also need fine tuners. So anybody who looks down on fine tuners just doesn't understand fiddle music, actually. Also, the bridge is very flat on my fiddle. I don't know if you can see that. The bridge is very flat, and that makes string crossings very easy. And playing double stops, where I'm playing two strings at the same time. A lot of violins would have a much more pronounced rounded bridge. I'm going to take a moment and clean off my fiddle. And this definitely is a fiddle. A little bit about this particular fiddle. It was restored by a guy who is in, I believe, Rockbridge County, Virginia, and he told me that, as far as he could recall, this instrument was from France and was made in the mid-19th century, so it is actually accurate to the period. The bow is a German bow from the 1980s, I believe, so that's from a viola, actually. So, speaking of fiddle tunes, I'm going to play you an old-time fiddle tune right now. You might recognize this as one from Cold Mountain. It is not Ruby with the Eyes That Sparkle. It was either the authors or the character in question who took that tune and called it something else, called it Ruby with the Eyes That Sparkle. The tune is actually called Shove That Pig's Foot a Little Further into the Fire. Another kind of tune you would hear all around America would be Irish music. Certainly, the Scots-Irish had a lot of influence with people who fought on both sides of the Civil War. And I'm going to play you an Irish tune now. This one's called the Turnpike. And that's the Turnpike. That's a reel, R-E-E-L, and one thing you might not know is that the difference between jigs and reels, a reel has 4 beats per measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Da 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4. A jig has 3 beats, very fast 3 beats. Da 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. A jig has how many? 3 letters. A reel has 4 letters. So now you know, if you're listening to Scots-Irish music, that, oh, that's a reel or a jig, and you can impress your friends. I played that tune my own way. I can't sound like a Donegal fiddler, nor would I want to. In folk music and especially in Appalachian music, there are accents, and you can hear these accents in a lot of the fiddling in certain pockets of the Appalachian Mountains. And this is because the Scots-Irish, when they settled here, they moved into the mountains and settled into these pockets in these communities that became very isolated. And you can hear accents as far as how people talk and also in how they play. That you can listen to certain fiddlers and you can hear that, oh, that's old-time fiddling, but also you can hear the influences of where they came from, either in Donegal or Galway or other parts of Scotland and Ireland. And my own accent, I would describe, I've heard many people describe my own accent, but I'm from North Carolina, so my fiddling has a very North Carolinian accent from the mountains of North Carolina. I would also, a lot of people say that it has a Cajun inflection, and that's because I was raised on Cajun and rock and roll music. And Cajun has a lot of a very steady backbeat, and I try to put that in my own fiddle playing because rock and roll has a lot of great backbeats in some of its greatest songs. And to demonstrate my accent as clearly as I can, I'm going to play a tune that you probably know, but I'm going to play it in my own particular way. So that's Yankee Doodle done my own special way. Talking about Yankee Doodle, that would definitely be a song you would hear during the Civil War, even though it predates the Civil War by quite a bit as being a tune from the Revolutionary War. And that was on purpose, actually. Many people in the Civil War thought they were following in a great patriotic tradition, both sides, North and South. The Southerners thought that they were following in the patriotic tradition of George Washington, and so did the Northerners. And so Yankee Doodle would be a song that they would have definitely identified with, as well as tunes from maybe a little bit later, like the War of 1812. And I'm going to play a tune called Old 1812. And this is probably one of my most favorite Civil War songs. And you would hear this on the battlefield, actually, with the fifes and drummers actually playing this song. Another song concerning the War of 1812 would have been Bonaparte's Retreat. And this was popular during the Civil War, talking about Bonaparte and the rout of a tyrant. And many people played this one as concerning Bonaparte, but it was thinly veiled for Abraham Lincoln. And you might recognize this tune. This is one that we definitely know today, and I think it was back in the 80s or 90s, the 1980s, or the 1990s, that this song was used as an ad campaign for beef. And you owe me a nickel if you went ahead and said, beef, it's what's for dinner at the end of that. I know you did. So we talked about Abraham Lincoln, probably the most famous personage in the Civil War, and many tunes were written about Abraham Lincoln being the President of the United States. And this one, they took Bonaparte's Retreat and named this one Abe's Retreat. And I'm going to play Abe's Retreat for you now. That was Abe's Retreat. Certainly many songs were written about Abraham Lincoln. One that is popular with old-time fiddlers, but I will not play, is called Booth Shot Lincoln. It just seems inappropriate. Another famous person from the Civil War was John Brown, or not from the Civil War, but concerning the Civil War certainly, was John Brown, led the raid on Harper's Ferry, and in my opinion, was the catalyst for the Civil War. And this tune, there are many John Brown tunes, John Brown's March, John Brown's Dream. I'm going to play John Brown's March for you right now because it's one of my favorite fiddle tunes. Perhaps the most famous John Brown tune would have been John Brown's Body. And the song went like this. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, but his soul is marching on. Julia Ward Howe was living in Washington, D.C., in the fall, winter of 1861-62, and heard the soldiers singing this when they were encamped in and around Washington, D.C., while George McClellan was transforming the Army of the Potomac into the fighting force that would win the Civil War. And she heard these lyrics, and she and her friends thought, it's a beautiful tune, but they didn't like the macabre nature of the words. And Julia Ward Howe thought that it needed better words. And the story is that she woke in the middle of the night and wrote down these words that were buzzing in her head and went back to sleep. And when she woke up, she found that she had written what became the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And instead of John Brown's body mouldering in the grave, it became, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. This apocalyptic vision of the armies of the Lord marching across the nation and bringing freedom to a race of people. And that's what became the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I'm going to play that for you now. Another popular type of tune from the mid-19th century would have been minstrel songs. And this is a kind of song where white people, exclusively white people, would wear blackface. They would put paint or some other darkening kind of agent on their face, make them dark, and they would accentuate their eyes with white paint and their lips as well. And it was a caricature of black people, and it was a dehumanizing act. I just want to be clear about that. But this was a popular form of entertainment where they caricatured black people and sang about them and made them seem very dim-witted and ugly and stupid. And let's be clear, it was an offensive form of entertainment, but it was popular back then nonetheless. And I do want to be clear, as a historian, it is our duty to look at the past unvarnished. And that's personally your own personal past and your historical past as well. You cannot move forward unless you address and really look at and analyze what has happened in the past. And that's what we're doing here. So one song that was popular during the Civil War would have been Year of the Jubilo. And the song sings about the Lincoln gunboats, and that would be about Lincoln again, and the master who ran away because the Lincoln gunboats are coming down the river and he does not want to be caught. And this tune sings about that. And it would be about the Year of the Jubilo was looking at it from the slave's perspective that, oh, this is kingdom coming. This is the year of the Jubilee, that freedom is coming. And I'm going to play that tune for you now. Another song that dealt with the Union coming through the South and bringing freedom to an enslaved people was probably one of the most famous tunes from the Civil War, and that was Marching Through Georgia, about Sherman's march from Atlanta to the sea. And I'm going to play that for you now. Stephen Foster, I've already talked about him, and I'm going to talk about him some more. Like I said, he brought a lot of the minstrel songs that I talked about to the mainstream. Minstrel songs, while they did dehumanize black people, another thing they dealt with was very crude and lewd body subject matter. And Stephen Foster brought these minstrel songs to a more respectable place. To be honest, yes, to be fair, they did still deal with slaves and present them in kind of a silly way. But it was much more palatable for normal people to approach these songs. And it bears stating that one of the popular forms of entertainment for music was not going to concerts, but it was playing music and people playing music. Music was published not for people to listen to. You did not have CDs, you didn't have records. You had music that would be published for people to take it into their homes and play. And so these songs were not complex. They were very approachable for amateur musicians to play, like me. And so one song that was sung would have been Angelina Baker. There's a fiddle tune that's actually misattributed to Stephen Foster that I like to play. I'm not going to play it for you tonight. But Angelina Baker is one that I will play for you to give you an example. And let's see, I do have to find the words here. One of the verses, to give you an example, was Angelina am so tall she never see the ground. She had to take a wellum scope to look down on the town. Angelina liked the boys as far as she can see them. She used to run all mass around to ax him for to freedom. So, a bit insulting. But I'm going to sing the rest of the song in my own way. Way down on the old plantation, that's where I was born. I used to be the whole creation, hoeing in the corn. Then I work and then I sing, so happy all the day, till Angelina Baker came and stole my heart away. Angelina Baker, Angelina Baker's gone. She left me here to weep a tear and beat on the old jawbone. I've seen my Angelina in the springtime and the fall. I've seen her in the cornfield and I've seen her at the ball. And every time I met her she was smiling like the sun. But now I'm left to weep a tear 'cause Angelina's gone. Angelina Baker, Angelina Baker's gone. She left me here to weep a tear and beat on the old jawbone. Early in the morning on a lovely summer day, I asked for Angelina and they say she's gone away. I don't know where to find her 'cause I don't know where she's gone. She left me here to weep a tear and beat on the old jawbone. Angelina Baker, Angelina Baker's gone. She left me here to weep a tear and beat on the old jawbone. And in case you didn't catch it, that song is about Angelina being sold. Another song by Stephen Foster, O Susanna, was another song from a perspective of a slave who himself had been sold down the river. And that is actually where we get the term sold down the river. The work supposedly got harder and harder the further down south you got, and the slave singing in O Susanna, telling O Susanna, don't cry for him, had been sold down to New Orleans, where the work was as hard as it could get. Most songs I memorize, but there are just some I need a little bit extra help with, and this is one of those right here. I'm going to get my stand a little closer here. Another beautiful song by Stephen Foster was Beautiful Dreamer. I'm going to do that for you now. Beautiful Dreamer is in the time signature it's in is what you would call a Viennese waltz. Now, while it is a very slow song as far as its melody goes, the meter is actually quite fast. Da 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 da. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. That's a Viennese waltz, a very fast waltz. And a waltz, a normal waltz in a much slower time, would be a tune that you would be hearing at a ball, or they would have dances, but not like we think of it, where they're standing with the man with his arm around the woman's waist. And facing each other. That would have been considered a little close, and I can picture the middle school chaperone making the two separate. You would have waltzes, but it would be in a line dance format. And I'm going to play a waltz for you now. This is just a simple melody. This is called the Spanish waltz. Let me see here. And they would play that several times through at a dance. Last tune I'm going to play, oh, nope, still got a few more, actually. So, one of the final tunes I'm going to play for you is one that Abraham Lincoln personally liked. And when the Civil War ended, the band was playing it when the news came that, well, when Robert E. Lee had surrendered, and of course that did not actually end the Civil War, but effectively it really did. And when news came and the band was playing in the streets, they played Dixie, and there was some question about whether it was appropriate, and Lincoln said, no, I like that tune and I consider it fairly won. And so I'm going to play Dixie for you now. Last song I'm going to play for you, there's a tradition with old time and bluegrass bands and fiddlers to end on a gospel song. And I'm going to do that for you tonight. I'm going to end with a song that was written in 1862 and was made famous again. It was very popular at the time, and it was made famous again with the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And my understanding is that they wanted to use it at the end of Cold Mountain when they're gathered around the picnic table, but of course that song had been appropriated by O Brother, Where Art Thou, so they went with a different song. And one thing I haven't really talked about too much is slave songs. And the songs that the slaves sung, well, they would have sung a lot of gospel hymns, actually. The slaves, many of them were extremely religious, but a lot of their revivals, they had to have under the cover of darkness. They held in secret because they were forbidden from singing gospel songs, and nothing too overt, especially about anything that would have talked about Moses and bringing his people to the promised land, because the slave owners understood how dangerous that would have been. So quite ironic that the slaves had to practice and sing their Christian beliefs in secret. But in any case, I'm going to play for you now Angel Band from 1862. Hold on just a minute. I thought I was done. I've got two more, actually, that I'm going to play for you. And this first one goes out to my friends who helped arrange this and made it possible, so especially for Janine. Last song, for real this time, that I'm going to play is one that is probably the most famously associated with the Civil War, and the one that least deserves to be. This song called Ashokan Farewell, I often hear people, I play, and people come up to me and say, can you play that one from the Civil War? And I know which one they're talking about because it's the tune that Jay Unger included on the soundtrack for the Ken Burns Civil War documentary. And he actually wrote it in, let me check my notes, 1982. And he wrote that song in 1982 because of the closing of the music camp Ashokan in the Catskills or Adirondack, I get them confused, in New York, this music camp, the closing of it, they were going to flood it and make it a man-made lake. And he composed this tune for that. But no tune has ever been so closely associated with the Civil War as this one. And I figure if I can at least give you some historical context for it, I'm allowed to play it for this presentation tonight. I'm going to do it now. That's going to conclude my program tonight. I hope you learned something. I hope you were entertained. Once again, thank you to the Rappahannock Valley Civil War Roundtable for making this possible. This video will be available on my music page. Also, if you're interested in a DVD of this program, go ahead and let me know on my Facebook Jeff White music page. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.